Hello folks, this is Jeff Phillips with SmokingMeat.com, and today I'm really excited. We're going to be making some burnt ends out of chuck roast. And this is probably something that you've heard of burnt ends before, and usually they're made out of brisket. But to cook a brisket, you're looking at 16, 18, 20 hours sometimes. And then once the brisket finishes, you are taking that point end, the fatty end, and you're chopping it up, putting it back in the smoker to make burnt ends, even increasing your time even more. And not to mention that brisket has gotten to be very expensive. You can pick up a chuck roast. Even a choice chuck roast would work fine for this. I went ahead and splurged for prime today. And I do always recommend you buy the best that you can afford. But we're going to be, in comparing it to brisket, you can have a chuck roast done in around 8 hours, and then another 30 minutes or so to turn them into burnt ends once you cube it up. So basically today, it's real simple. You're going to be shocked at how simple this is. I'm going to be using some Worcestershire sauce and just pouring it right over the meat to wet it. And then I'm going to be adding some Texas-style rub to all sides of this. And then we're going to cook it at about 225 for around 8 hours. And at that point, I'm going to bring it in. Once it reaches 190 degrees, I'm going to bring it in, cube it up into about 3/4 inch size pieces, and take it back out to the smoker, put it on high searing heat, and making burnt ends out of it. So we'll cover all that going forward. Right now, I'm going to douse this with some Worcestershire sauce. Make sure I say that correctly. It's a word I always get tripped up on. You'll notice I've placed this down in a pan because it does get a little messy. And like a lot of things, it cooks perfectly fine down in this pan. It gets plenty of smoke, and just wet it real good. Now I'm going to be using my Texas style rub today on this. Texas style rub works really good with all beef, in my opinion. It's got a little more salt than the original rub. Be pretty liberal with it. This is a thick piece of meat. We're talking in excess of 2 inches, 2.5 inches thick here. And so it's going to be able to handle quite a bit of this rub. I'm just trying to get all these edges. We're going to leave this sitting for a few minutes like we do most of the things that we do. After we add the rub, we want the salt in that rub to pull the juices to the surface and create a paste and help that rub to stick to that meat. I need to flip it over, so we want that rub to be stuck before we do that so we don't lose it. So we'll let this sit here probably 10, 12 minutes, and then we'll meet you back here. So we've let this thing sit for 10 or 15 minutes so that rub can get that wet look, and it's really looking good at this point. I'm going to flip it over, get the other side, and we'll be ready for the smoker at that point. Alright, just like on the other side, we're just going to douse it with a little more Worcestershire. It had some in the bottom of the pan, so technically I guess you could skip this part. And then we're going to go back with some Texas style rub. I'm going to use plenty. You don't have to get too much, but enough. And that'll do it right there. Now we're going to leave this sitting here another 10 or 15 minutes. Let that rub sit there and get real good and stuck to the meat. And we're going to go out and get the smoker ready, and by that time we should be ready to get this on there. All right, we just brought this chuck roast in from the pellet smoker. I'm using the Country Smokers pellet smoker out there. It's a little small smoker, but it does a really good job for things like this when you're just doing small pieces of meat. We're making some burn-ins. So basically I've cooked this to 190 degrees. I've brought it in. I've let it cool down for a few minutes. And I'm just going to cube this thing up into about 3/4 inch pieces. And then we'll add some more seasoning, a little sauce to it, and put it back on there at high heat. All right, I'm just going to kind of cube this up. I'm not going to be too crazy about it. I'm trying to get these about 3/4 inch or so. That meat is really tender, which is what I want. Normally I would do this on a cutting board, but this is an old pan, so it's okay. Try to go about 3/4 inch this way as well. You can tell by looking at that, it's really tender. I maybe could have let this cool down a little more and it would have cut a little easier. But I'm wanting to get this done. I'm going to put that right back in the pan it came out of. There's a lot of good juices down in there. That'll just make it taste even better. Man, this is so tender. It's going to be so good. So I've got these all cubed up. I've placed the burn-ins back into the pan they actually cooked in. Now there's a lot of good juices and rendered fat down in here, so that's really going to be good. I'm going to add a little bit of barbecue sauce on this because I want the outside of that meat. I want every side of each one of those cubes to be caramelized. So I don't like burn-ins that are really too sloppy, but I am going to add a little sauce to help the rub to stick, and I'm going to add some of my original rub now, and we'll take those out to the smoker and put some high heat to them. So I'm just using my original barbecue sauce here. I'm not going to use too much because I got a lot of juice down there in the bottom of that pan that I'm going to stir around. You'll see here I'm not going to add much. I just want a little bit. Okay, and I'm just going to stir these around. Get them real nice and gooey. All that flavor on the bottom of that pan that's getting onto that meat, it's going to be phenomenal flavor. I mean, you can just tell by looking how good it's going to be. As you know, we prep these with the Texas style rub, but when it comes to making burn-ins, I like for them to have a little bit of a sweet flavor on the outside. It also helps to get that real nice caramelized crust. So I'm going to be using my Jeff's original rub on this part of the instructions. About like that ought to do it. And I'm going to stir that around. That's going to mix with those meat juices and the sauce, the little bit of sauce that I've added. And when I hit this with high heat, all that rub on the outside, all that the sugar is going to caramelize on the outside, and it's going to give it an amazing flavor. That'll do it right there. All right, we just brought these burn-ins made out of chuck roast into the house off the smoker, and once they reached 190 degrees, we put them back on the smoker at high heat, which is about 500 degrees, and we went out about every 8 to 10 minutes and stirred them around, and we just wanted to get all sides of these burn-ins real nice and caramelized, which they did, and rendered out a little more of the fat. So we're going to give these a little taste test here. I'm going to grab one there. They're still really hot. Those are so good. Those are so good, guys. You gotta try these. I've had brisket burn-ins. I've had pulled pork burn-ins. I've had burn-ins made out of pork belly. And I'm telling you, these are just so hard to beat, and they're so easy to do. This is something you can do at home yourself in your smoker in about 7 or 8 hours. You know, most of the time you see burn-ins that are made from brisket, and that's a really good option, and I love brisket burn-ins. But for the average guy, we work a lot, you know, and gal, that works all the time, and you don't have a lot of time. Something like this, you can get up on a Saturday morning, you can get this on the smoker, and you can have these ready in, like I say, about 8 hours. You can have them ready by dinner time. That's what makes these chuck roast burn-ins so special. Just want to do a little quick recap here. We bought a 3-pound chuck roast and brought it home. I did go with the prime, as I mentioned, and just a real simple prep. All I did was I put it down in a foil pan. I poured Worcestershire sauce all over the top, but used my Texas style rub on it. Let that get that wet look that I like. Flipped it over. Did the Worcestershire sauce and the rub on the other, the Texas style rub on the other side as well. Let it sit there a few minutes while I went and got the smoker ready. And we cooked these at 225 for about 8 hours. We let the chuck roast get to 190 degrees, at which point I brought it in, cubed it up to about 3/4 inch size cubes. And at that point I added a little bit of my barbecue sauce, not much, just enough to just barely wet the surface. And then of course I had some of the fat drippings on the bottom, which also worked to do that as well. Added some of my original rub for that sweet sugar caramelization on the outside. I put it back on the smoker at 500 degrees and then stirred them around about every 8 minutes. I did that, left them on there about 30 minutes, stirred them I think 3 times during that amount of time. Brought them in and they were ready to eat at that point, and very delicious. And of course, if you guys decide to do this yourself, be sure and comment below and let me know how it goes. Thank you for sticking around with me today as I cooked up these burn-ins made out of chuck roast. If you enjoyed this video, be sure and hit that subscribe button below. And once you do that, you'll see a bell icon. Click on that if you want to get notifications, and you'll be one of the first to know about it whenever I upload a new video. Once again, this is Jeff Phillips with SmokingMeat.com, and I will see you next time.